Welcome everyone, Jason here to take you through type in InDesign. I have an InDesign document that's open that has some text in it that's ready to go. But if you want to start a new document from scratch, to put text into that, File menu, New Document, set the parameters on how you'd lay out your page, size, orientation, the number of pages, and then you can click Create. Here we're going to talk about text that is already existing in a document, but we're also going to talk about adding new text. Starting off with the Type tool. The Type tool in the toolbar is going to be nested with both the Type and the Type on a Path tool. Both of these tools can come up when you click and hold on the Type tool. You'll see the shortcut for the Type tool is the letter T. The shortcut for Type on a Path is Shift T. Now we're going to use the Type tool all the time because this is what InDesign is really made for. Text, placing graphics or images, and creating a layout. Now the other tool that we're going to use a lot of the time is going to be our Selection tool. We're going to be going back and forth in between the Selection and the Type tool all the time. The Selection tool is the letter V, but it also has another shortcut, which is the Escape key. Why does it have both? You're going to find out very shortly because it's very important. Number one thing that you have to know about text in InDesign. Text is going to be in a container. Whenever we're working with text here, I can't take my Type tool and simply click someplace and begin to type. Nothing's going to happen. We have to at least either draw a container with our text tool or click on an existing container to be able to get content into our text container. Once we draw that container, you'll notice that we have the cursor flashing there, and it's ready to put text in this container. For these purposes, I'm going to add what's called Placeholder Text. So, under the Type menu, I can go down to the bottom and choose Fill with Placeholder Text. With my Text tool active and my container drawn, it will fill this container with placeholder text. Now I'm going to go back to my Selection tool, and I'm going to then show you the basics of what we can do with a text container. You will be switching back and forth between the Type tool and the Selection tool because the Selection tool is going to allow you to move and change and reshape your container. And your Type tool is allow you to edit the contents inside the container. So switching back and forth between the two of these is very important. Now remember that the Selection tool has two different shortcuts. One of them is the letter V and the other one is Escape. Well, if you type in the letter V when you are in the middle of typing something inside your text container, to switch over to the Selection tool, you will get the letter V. However, by hitting the Escape key, it's going to switch back to your Selection tool. Then hitting your T is going to bring you to your Type tool. So that allows you to get back and forth between those things, something that you will do numerous times. A quick and easy way to get back into editing your text container when you're on the Selection tool is to select this container and double click. Simply by double clicking, you will be able to turn that Selection tool into the Type tool and you see your flashing cursor. Then, to select copy in here to change the copy, size, words, respell things, add things to this, you're going to want to select the word or the line or the paragraph. Simple things. Double click will select a word. 3 clicks will select an entire line from left to right. 4 clicks will do an entire paragraph. And 5 clicks will do all of the text in your container. So with this, I can very quickly go in and select my content so that I can begin to edit and change all these features. I'm going to go back to the Selection tool, and I'm going to work with my container right now. With the container, I have pull handles on the top, bottom, left, and right, and also in the centers. But we also have a lot of other things going on inside a text container, and I'm going to simply delete all of the copy out of my container so we can see all of these little points and nodules here. You'll notice that on the upper left-hand side and the lower right-hand side, not directly in the corners, but close to the corners, is a little box that's slightly larger. That is not a pull handle. This is for our text linking or for our text threads. We have the blue box, which is for our anchored text objects. We have our yellow box for changing the attributes or the corners of our text container. And we have the O for accessing further type options for certain items that may not be readily accessible through the keyboard, any other text features that are not available in the type menu. So I'm going to go back in, double click, and I'm going to put my copy back into my text container. Switch back over to my selection tool. Now I can select and I can move this container all around my page. To change the size of my container, I can pull on any one of the corner or any one of the center pull handles, and I can change the size of my container, which will cause all of the text inside to reflow with the changing of the container. Nice and easy. I can move the containers around the page, any place that I would like to have them. If I would like to rotate a container, I can hover outside any of the corners and I can simply rotate the container. If I'd like to, rotate the container 90 degrees, make it vertical, whatever would work. So going in and editing the copy is something that's very important. So we're going to be going in and we're going to be working with editing type. So I have some text that I have flown in here, and I would like to edit this type and change the copy. Again, double click selects a word, triple click will do a line, 4 clicks will do the entire paragraph. To change the attributes of the paragraph, I can go into a couple different places. One, I can go into my control bar, and if you're running Adobe InDesign 2021, the control bar probably isn't up there by default. So you can go into your window menu and call up the control bar. I've been using InDesign for several generations, so this is what I'm used to having. You can also rely on the properties panel if you don't have as much space on your monitor. And the properties panel will come up with all of the items that we need here for both our character and paragraph formatting. That properties panel is under Window, Properties. Once the text is selected, we can then go and choose from our list of fonts. And we can choose here from our control bar or from our properties panel. I'm going to use the control bar because that's what I'm most used to, but everything that's going to be here is going to be over here unless I point out differently, because sometimes they do leave features out or add features into other ones. So if I click on this double dot here, you'll notice that I get all my character formatting, kerning, tracking, leading, stretching, all that content, and I get the same thing here. So going to the font drop-down menu, this allows me to click on the drop-down menu and get the font that I would like to see. The way this renders is that you can see your actual text that you have in your text container rendered in the font that you're looking for. And that's because the selected text option is chosen. You can go up to the top of your font drop-down menu and you can click on the selected text drop-down menu and you can have the preview display in a different way other than what your selected text is showing. Now in InDesign, you can simply run your cursor up or down, don't even have to click, and you can scroll through all the fonts and see exactly what they look like on screen just by running your text cursor over. You can scroll very quickly and you can pick just about any typeface that you could imagine right here through your font panel. And with that chosen, we can then go and choose any style that this font would have, regular, bold, italic, condensed, whatever it may be, and then we can select that from here. Going in and controlling our point size or our type size here, we can do it with our up or down arrows or our drop-down menu, or we can simply highlight the value, plug in whatever number and hit return, or simply put the cursor in the field and use your up arrow or down arrow to change the size of your copy. The easiest shortcut that I like to use is going to be my Shift Command or Shift Control, and then your greater than or less than, which if you look, it's shared by your period and your comma keys. So Shift Command or Shift Control greater than or less than will go ahead and reduce or enlarge the size of your font. Next we have the leading, and the leading is the space between lines. If the leading is set to auto, When you increase the size of the type, the leading will automatically increase to the tune of 20% more than your actual point size. So automatic leading allows you to adjust your point size, and the leading will adjust automatically. Quick shortcut to adjust the leading: Option or Alt up arrow is going to reduce or tighten up the leading. Option or Alt down arrow will loosen or increase the leading. Next to this, we have our all caps, we have our superscript, we have our underline, our lowercase caps, which gives you our initial caps, subscript, and then strike through. No bold, no italic. If you're looking for something for bold or italic, you're going to have to go in and choose your font and see if that font has a style that is bold or italic. Just like Illustrator, it won't give you a fake bold or italic. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about kerning and tracking. And I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to talk about kerning. Here I have a headline, so I'm going to use my Shift Command or Shift Control greater than. And I notice that the spacing in between these letters isn't exactly the same. So I'm going to adjust kerning. Kerning is set up here. We have our kerning and we have our tracking. A negative number means that we're going to track things tighter, so it's going to bring those characters closer together. A positive number is going to give you a lot more space between your letters here, and that's going to be a lot of tracking or a lot of kerning. So negative numbers will bring everything closer. Positive numbers will push them apart. Keyboard shortcuts for that, very simple. Option right arrow will increase your kerning. Option left arrow will decrease your kerning. As you go through, you can kern each and every character by simply moving your cursor to the space between each letter and adjust that spacing overall. If you'd like to adjust all of the spacing between the letters universally instead of one at a time, that is what's called tracking, where it allows you to select everything, and then your tracking can be done. Same thing as kerning, it's just tracking requires that you select multiple characters at a time, and that exact same shortcut is the same as it is for kerning, option left arrow or option right arrow. You are not stretching the type, you are not deforming the type, you are not changing the size. You are simply changing the distance between each and every letter universally. If you do it one by one, that is kerning. If you do it overall, that is tracking. Coming to the place where you should never venture, your vertical and your horizontal stretching of type, nope, don't do it at all. We do have our baseline shift, which is exceptionally helpful when we're doing any type of, say, registered trademark symbol or copyright symbol or superscript. I can select my item that I would like to go ahead and superscript. I could do that here by using the superscript. And then the baseline, I can adjust the baseline shift of just this one character to move it above or below the baseline. And by the way, the baseline is this invisible line that all of the type sits on. That's the baseline. Baseline shift is only to be used when you're shifting a specific character, like a circle R or a TM or a superscript, where the height of that particular character may be exceptionally high or low based on the top of the ascenders, and it may just seem like it's out of place. Going in and creating an entire line of copy and then using a baseline shift to make it go up or down is never something you should do, ever, at all. So that's only for specific characters. Lastly, we have what some people think is italic, and this is where you can take your font, and I call this drunken tilty type, where it just makes your type look drunk and lean over. Some people that think this is italic, no, it's just a really bad way to go ahead and take your font and make it lean over. Don't ever use it. It's a horrible thing. I showed you, but again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So this is just some of the very basic things that you can go in and you can run through with your type. Now, if you'd like to research other typefaces, go to your Type panel, click on the drop-down menu, and click on the Find More tab. The Find More tab will automatically bring you into the Adobe website of every single font that the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription provides you with. And you can search through all of these different typefaces, just like you would via their website. And if you like a typeface that you'd like to use, you can see that typeface if you want to activate the entire family. The way you see the entire family is clicking on the drop-down menu here, or a little twirly. Then you can see all of the styles in that typeface. And maybe you want just a particular style. You can click, and then you can come over here to the Download or the Activate Cloud button. You click on that, and it's going to ask you to activate that, and away it goes. It may ask you to sign in to your Creative Cloud login, which is fine. You simply sign in the same way you sign in for all of your Creative Cloud applications, and the font will become activated until you deactivate this font. You don't have to activate this every time that you come into InDesign. So with that font chosen and with it being downloaded here, we can use this. Now, what I'd like to show you too is going in and picking other kind of classifications of typefaces. By going under your type menu and choosing the menu filter here and clicking on the funnel icon, this allows you to search through the Adobe Typekit with any types of classifications. So if you were looking for a classic serif or a sans serif or some type of handwritten or some type of decorative, maybe it's a little bit Gothic, maybe you want something that's going to be a little bit more script, you can click on a very specific classification, and then all of the copy that you get here is then going to be based on what it is that you filtered your classification. And again, these are all through the Adobe website, the Adobe fonts. So these are available in all of your Adobe applications, which makes it really nice to be able to use. Okay, so there's our typefaces. Now, that was our basic character formatting. Now let's get into our paragraph formatting. And our paragraph formatting allows us to go in and allows us to set our left, right, centered, justified content. Now, when you're working on a large screen, you'll see you have all of your character formatting and it stops right here, and then your paragraph formatting starts over here. If you're working on a smaller screen, you have to go over to the left-hand edge and switch back and forth between your character and your paragraph formatting. You may have a very small screen and you may not see all that I'm seeing in the control bar, so that's why the Properties panel could be of great use, because here you can click on your paragraph formatting controls and then you can see everything that's in the control bar here in a vertical format so that you don't lose what's going on in the control bar. Now when it comes to paragraph formatting control, I do not need to select the entire paragraph in order to control the paragraph formatting controls. All I need to do is have my cursor someplace in this paragraph, and then I can control the left, centered, or right justified attributes of the text as it stands inside the container. Okay? Now, even if I select part of that, I will be able to go in and format the entire paragraph without having to select the entire paragraph. That's a really nice thing. If you do want to select the entire paragraph, go right ahead. Over here, we have our left indent and our right indent, which indents from our actual text container. So as the container gets larger or smaller, these will always remain the same. One thing you have to be careful of, if you indent too far from both sides and then make your container very narrow, which I'm going to show you, all of a sudden your type will seem to disappear, and then you can't figure out where it went because your container is too narrow, and all of a sudden the type disappears, and you're like, why can't I see it? The reason why, narrow container, and your indents here, when you select your copy, are going to be too much of an indent from left to right, and everything disappears. So, using the left and right indent we use sometimes, but not very common, but when we need to use it, it's nice to have to be able to go and set your indents left and right. We can also choose what's called the first line indent, and the first line indent will indent the first line after every paragraph return. What's nice about this is when I hit the return key, it then automatically will indent the amount that I've set here in my indent. We also have the ability to control the space before our paragraphs or the space after our paragraphs. Space after a paragraph is quite nice, and all this does is that when we hit our return key, we can then choose how much space we'd like after our return key. Going in and hitting your return key twice? Absolutely not. One of the rules that I have with InDesign, if you use your space bar twice, there's a better way to do it. If you use your tab key more than twice, there's a better way to do it. And certainly going in and hitting your return key twice, no. If you want a double return, you will put a return in, and then you'll control how much space after that paragraph to then control the actual spacing between your paragraphs. Okay? So that can work out really good. Moving over here, we have our hyphenation, which allows us to go paragraph by paragraph and turn off our hyphenation, or we can select multiple paragraphs and turn off our hyphenation so that it doesn't show any hyphens. I'm not a fan of hyphenation at all. I always turn it off. I think hyphenation is one of those things that's great when you have a typewriter, but in today's world with our electronics, there are so many better ways that we can make sure our type flows. So for me, hyphenation, turn it off. Done, gone. Okay. So now let's talk about our actual text container itself, because I've got some containers here that can be a 2-column or a 3-column container, and then I've got one that's just a single column container. Okay? Well, I don't need to go in and put my text into separate individual containers. Say if I wanted 2 columns, I can actually put it into one container, and then I can divide that container up into multiple columns. But before I do that, I want to talk about the actual sizing of your container. Now, the sizing of the container here is quite important. Zooming in on it, I'm going to go to my selection tool, and I may be typing in the copy, and I may select everything. Quick way to select everything is put your text cursor in there, go under your Edit menu, and choose Select All, which is Command or Control A. So instead of clicking 5 times, which should be a bit tedious, Command or Control A will allow you to select all the content of your container at once without multiple clicks. I may have gone in, chosen a different type or point size, and the end result is my container now does not have enough room to support all of my copy. I know that because I get the plus, which is telling me I have text overflow, or more specifically, overset text. So, using my selection tool, I can keep opening up my container until that box goes away. And this could take a lot of time because you don't know how big your container needs to be in order to fit all your text. Easy way to take care of this, bottom center pull handle, double click. It will window shade and open it up right to the end of your text. Now the same is true if we have a larger container that we need and we have a lot of extra space. I could just simply click and pull this up and close this up here, but it takes too much time. I'm again going to double click on that bottom center pull handle, and it's going to take away all that extra space. So making sure that your copy does not overflow or your text isn't overset. It will still be there in the text container, it just won't print. It doesn't disappear. So how do I get my text into multiple columns here? Simple. In my control bar, I go up to my formatting. Now you'll notice this, that's kind of interesting. You'll notice when I have my container selected here, I no longer see my font and my paragraph formatting controls. I see something different. I see the location and the size and the percentage and the rotation here. And that's the reason why is because I have it selected with my selection tool. I don't have it selected with the type tool. The second I select it with a type tool, my entire control bar will switch over to all my paragraph formatting and character formatting controls. This is very common because people will get really annoyed. Chances are in InDesign that you don't have the right tool object combination selected. You'll also notice in the Properties panel, my Character panel is completely empty because I don't have any text selected. I have a container, but that's not text. So I'm going to select my container with my Selection tool, and up in my control bar, I have my jail cell and my supermarket doors. Okay? The little jail cell is your number of columns in your container. The default when you use your type tool to draw a container is one column, and I can set this to multiple columns. The copy simply flows down to the bottom of one column, to the next, and to the next column. Okay? Now, with this, I can also go in and I can set the gap or the gutter between those columns, larger or smaller. Now, the number of columns will always be equal with columns. I can't go in and make one column wider and one column narrower. If I change the size of my text container by going to my selection tool and pulling on the pull handles, those columns will always be equal. I can always reduce it back down to one column, a single column text container, or multiple columns. Be careful, if you make your columns too small, the words won't fit and then it'll look like all of your text disappears. That's because the words are too wide or your columns are too narrow and you can't fit all of your content in. Now, when I do multiple column text containers, I can do it here through the control bar, but I can always go under my object menu and I can select text frame options, which are Command or Control B. The text frame options here allows me to set the number of columns. If I turn on my preview window, I can set the number of columns and then also the gutter space, which mirrors this right here in my control bar. So that's nice. That works quite well. Now I notice that the copy here fills the first column, fills the second column, but doesn't fill the third column. I'd like to balance these columns out. So if I double click on my bottom center pull handle, that will try to balance that copy out as best as possible. Now there's another way to set it to be auto-balancing so that when you are typing your content in and your container's larger, that it automatically balances and not because the container has shoved everything back up. And that is going to be next to your columns and your gutter width. We have our two little sections here. This is our unbalanced columns, which simply fills the entire column, then fills the next, and then lands the third one, or the remaining columns, wherever they fall. By clicking on the balanced columns, as you put copy in or you take copy out, it will automatically try to balance those columns without you having to go in and change the height of your entire text container. How can you change that? Object menu, again, text frame options, and there is where the balanced columns is that matches this right here. Kind of nice. Now you can go in and you can also just double click on that pull handle to shore that up as well. Now here's a trick that I like, and this is something that I use all the time. It is Option Command C or Alt Control C. Option Command or Alt Control C will automatically shore up that text container. That's the shortcut to the shortcut of double clicking on that center pull handle. Now I'm going to create another text container. Hit T on my keyboard, grab a text container, and I'm going to type some type into that. Using my Shift Command or Shift Control greater than, I'm going to make my type larger. I'm going to go to my paragraph formatting control and I'm going to center that left and right in my container. I'm going to choose a typeface that I like. Now, I've centered my type left to right by using my centering command. Okay, my left, right, centered, justified. But how do I make this centered top to bottom? The one thing that I don't do is I don't go in and keep hitting return and then adjusting my leading to make this less or more here and try to get this in the middle. Absolutely not. In InDesign, there are ways to do everything, and if you find yourself with old habits trying to go ahead and slap and tickle things into position by spacing and tabs and doing all this other stuff, absolutely not. So here's what I'm going to do. I have my container selected with the selection tool. Going up into my control bar next to where I've set my number of columns and my gutters, my balanced or unbalanced columns, I have 4 little window shade items here. And this allows me to align the text to the top of my text box, the bottom, the center, or vertically justify. So if I line this to the center of my text container, no matter what size I make my text container, that text will always be in the middle. I can also go under the object menu, under my text frame options, and here's where I can set my vertical justification, top, center, bottom, or justified. I chose center, which is exactly what I chose here in these shortcuts. Now here's an even shorter shortcut. When you go to any of your text frame option items here, if you would like to open that dialog box, but you don't want to go to the menu and click on your text frame options, or remember the Command or Control B, remember this. Hold down your Option or your Alt key and Option or Alt click on these items over here, and what that will do is that will open up your text frame options box. So I'm going to set that to be center justified. Why would I want to do this? Well, while I have my container selected, I can go into the center of my control bar and I could put a border or a stroke around my container. No, I'm not going to draw a totally separate box with a border or a fill and then put my text container on top of it. Because with InDesign, a container can do many different things. I can fill this container with a color and put a stroke or a border around it, as well as having my text in it as well, and not doing two separate containers. Two separate containers then means two things to then have to align and mess with and center, and it's never going to work out. Okay? In this case, one is definitely better than two. So this container is a multi-purpose container. One thing that you will hear me say quite often with any InDesign videos is, in InDesign, a container is a container is a container. You could put text in here, images, graphics, logos, or fill, color, stroke, whatever. And InDesign is like, it's a box. You do whatever you want to with the box, we're fine with it. But you don't need to build multiple boxes because you can do so many things to one single box. So that's a really important key when you're dealing with this kind of content. So now that we've gone through some of our basic text frame options here, what I'd like to show you is text wrap. Now, dealing with text wrap is something that's very important because as we go through and we work with our content, we're going to want to introduce images. Images, we may want to have captions. And with captions, we're probably going to want to read the captions. And we want to have room underneath our photograph to put those captions in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my copy up here. And now I'd like to import a picture. Now, pictures also go in a container. So I'm going to draw a container where I'd like my picture to be. And just for these purposes, I'm going to fill this container with a color so we can see where our picture would be on our page. Okay, so there's my picture. Now you notice when I put my picture or my graphic or my logo, that box or that image container where the image would be sits over the top of my copy. That doesn't really work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a force field around this image container to wrap the text around. And so this is called text wrap. And I do that by selecting my image container, window menu, go down to text wrap, Option Command or Alt Control W. The text wrap panel comes up and I have multiple different text wraps here. I have my window blinds with my cell phone, the window blinds with the cell phone open, the window blinds with an egg, s'mores, and s'mores missing their pants. Now, no, those are not the official names. No text wrap, text around the bounding box, text around the object, and jump to next column. Why do I have goofy names for them? Because you remember them better. So here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to wrap around my bounding box. When I click the wrap around the bounding box, I can increase the values around that box and you'll see a force field will appear around this container. It does all four sides because this is linked together. Now with this text wrap, any place that I get this container, it's going to automatically push the copy away from this container. Just like two magnets with their reverse polarity, it's always going to push it aside. So no matter where I put this or how I resize this container, those will always give me that kind of text wrap. One of the things you do not want to do is you do not want to put an image in the middle of text wrap here so that the text reads on the left and then having to jump over to the right side of the container like this. This is not smart. This is really bad typography. But putting the image container here in the gutter works just fine because then we get the wrap around here and we get the wrap around there as well. So this works really good. Well, what happens if I have a circle and my image is in a circle? Well, that's not a problem. Let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to go over to my toolbar and I'm going to click on my rectangle tool and get my ellipse tool. And I'm going to draw a circle. And again, I'm just going to apply a fill here for display purposes so we can see how my picture would appear in this container. If I wrap it around the bounding box, you can see that it wraps around the square, which is the bounding box of the circle. And that doesn't work for me because it's like if I have a circle, why would I have a square buffer around it? But if I go and I use my text wrap around the object shape, this allows me to get a singular measurement field to then give me that little force field around it that can be adjusted so that that image shape can then have the force field around it. Okay, that works really well. This also works if you have an oddly shaped image and you'd like to wrap it around the image. Going in and using this wrap around your object shape rather than the bounding box could work very well. I'm just going to delete this for now. Here's my image. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to put a caption underneath this image. So I'm going to unlink all 4 measurements in the text wrap once I have my image container selected. And the bottom measurement I'm going to add some extra text wrappage to give me room for a caption. Looks pretty good. And now to put the caption in, the caption will have to be in its own text container. I can't just click here. So I'm going to take my type tool and I'm going to draw a text container down here, kind of the width of my image. And a quick way to fill this with text instantly is to right-click on your container in your tool combination. And I'm going to fill this with placeholder text. So this is going to be my caption. I'm going to reduce this down a bit and get a little bit more copy in there. There we go. And I think I'm going to make this bold as well by going up to my control bar and picking a font that is actually bold or something a little bit bigger. And so if I select something a little bit larger, a little bit heavier here, okay, there it is. So there's my caption. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see what's going to go on. Now, text wrap is absolute, which means if this gets anywhere around text, it's going to force it outside the bounding box. But I have my caption. So I move my caption up here, and I put it in place, and it flashes, and then it disappears. Why? Well, the reason why is because this text wrap is forcing the caption out of the container, so I can't see it. No matter where I put this in front or behind, I'm always going to have the problem of this force field around the image container forcing the text around my box. So with this container, I'm going to go back under the Object menu, back into our very familiar text frame options box, and I'm going to click on the Ignore Text Wrap. That then makes this text container immune to any text wrap. And then my caption can then sit very nicely inside that little force field that I had created around my image container, forcing the text in this particular container all around. But this one, you'll notice the text doesn't get forced out because I told it under my text box options to ignore that text wrap. So something to think about. Quite interesting. So that's just the very basics of text. Being able to go and create a text container, choose your font, choose your style, leading, kerning, tracking, paragraph formatting, and then go in and be able to use your vertical justification to center text in the text container, and then create multiple columns, text wrap around an object, and see how you can put in a caption. Working with text in something other than a rectangular or square container in InDesign is quite easy to take care of. With my type tool, I'm going to draw a container. I'm going to right-click or control-click into this container, and from my contextual menu, choose Fill with Placeholder Text. If I'd like to convert this to a shape other than the square or the rectangle that I have, I can simply go to the Object menu, down to the bottom, to convert shape. Here, I can simply convert it to any other type of shape that I'd like, and the text stays in that container. Works out quite fine. If I decide that I would like to draw a container first, any shape that I'd like, and I draw this container first, and then switch over to my type tool, all I have to do is click inside that container or on the container edge to indicate that this is the area in which I would like to turn this into type, and then I can type or right-click and fill with placeholder text. Any shape that I have here, circle, square, triangle, can always be converted. You don't lose any of the type when you do convert that. Object, convert shape, and convert that back to anything that you want. Rectangle, square, triangle, polygon. Very simple, very straightforward to do. Now let's talk about type on a path instead of in a shape. If I'd like to put type on a path, I'm going to create a shape. In this case, I'm going to draw a circle. And I would like the type to go along the shape and not in it. So this is where I would jump over to my type on a path tool. Type tool is the letter T. Type on a path is going to be Shift T. In order to activate this, hover the cursor over until you see the plus, and that then touches the edge of your container or the edge of your line. This can be a closed container, it can be an open line. It's just going to follow the path. Now with InDesign, if you do have a stroke or a fill on your shape, it will retain that stroke or the fill. That's not something that Illustrator does. In InDesign, it does. So you can type along the path and put your type on this. I'm going to select all of my copy, and from this, choose the font in my font menu that I would like to have. And then I can adjust the size and any other attributes that I have of this typeface. Now to adjust the type on a path, it's quite easy. But there are a couple tricky items here with type on a path that you have to be careful of. You'll see we have two vertical bars at the beginning of the type. Halfway across those vertical bars is this little joystick. That little joystick allows me to touch that, looks like a little thumbtack, and I can pull my copy along the path. These bars are going to allow me to be my start and my stop. And you can see when I hover over them, this one has the vertical line pointing to the right. This is my start, and this is my stop over here. Don't click on these. These are not handles. This is your text link or text overflow, and I'll show you the text overflow. If I run that stop too far and I block my text, you'll see that becomes my little text overflow block. So those aren't handles. If you click on them, what you're going to get is you're going to get this loaded cursor, and then you're like, okay, what is that? Just simply hit the escape key and you're back to what you've got. Now you can also set this text so that it's centered on your path between your start and your stop. And you can just put your cursor anywhere in that type. Go to your paragraph formatting controls, either in your control bar or in your properties panel, and choose center, left, or right justified, and that will justify the entire content. Finding that little joystick halfway in between your start and your stop allows you to click on that joystick, drag the copy to the inside of the path or along the path, and then drag the copy outside the path to flip it. Under the Type menu, we have Type on a Path and we have Type on a Path options. Type on a Path options, if you use Illustrator, they're identical. Rainbow, skew, 3D ribbon, stair step, all which in my 2 cents worth of input here are all hideous. Rainbow, okay, you need to do something like a logo, that works. You can flip the type on the path by choosing the flip command. You can align the path to the center or the bottom or the top of the baseline, of the center, of your descender, of your ascender, and reference it that way. So different ways that you can have the type aligned to your path. If you choose to do an open path, the same thing is true. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to use my pencil tool to draw a freeform path. Take my Type on a Path tool, click anywhere along that path, and I can begin typing along that path. I will end up with my start and my stop bars. There is my little start there's my stop, and there's my joystick in the middle that I can slide right along or flip over. Now, if I move my stop position over here, then I can go and find my joystick. Sometimes it's hard to find, but always keep in mind that joystick is halfway between your start and your little stop items there. And I can drag that to the other side. So pretty simple with type on a path. Not rocket science, but if you have a path, that can work just fine. Now I'd like to talk about things that are a little bit more intricate in the actual text itself. When we type in the text, we don't see all of our hidden characters, all of our spaces, our tabs, and our paragraph returns. But we can. Under the Type menu, we can go to the bottom and show hidden characters. Option Command or Alt Control I. Your hidden characters will show up, and these hidden characters show as dots or paragraph symbols, or if you have a tab, you're going to get the little double caret. And these are going to be very helpful when it comes to working with your copy. Why is this? Because you can tell what's been done to the copy. How do you know how this space got here at the very beginning if you don't have invisibles? Somebody may have gone in and tapped their space bar 6 times. Somebody may have not known how to space anything, and to move copy down, they just simply hit multiple returns. Well, you don't see that when you have your invisibles turned off. I, out of habit, work with my invisibles on all the time so I can always see what is happening in the flow of my copy. Now, one thing that's very unique about InDesign and understanding how these little hidden characters work or why they're so important, and it's this feature. I'm going to go over here to this section of copy so we can see exactly what goes on. And I want to talk about selecting copy. I know we talked about it earlier in this video. Double click will select the word, triple click does the line, 4 clicks does the entire paragraph. But some people like to go in and they like to select all the copy themselves, which is fine. So my question is, are you a left to right or a right to left selector? And you may be wondering, okay, why is that important? Well, here's why it's important. Some people start at the bottom and select up, other people start at the top and select down. So if you start at the top here and you select all the copy that you see in this paragraph, and you adjust the content so that you adjust the size and the leading and the font size, everything else, it all works, okay? But the problem is when you do this, do you see this hidden character right here? This hidden character is still part of this paragraph. And the problem with this is this hidden paragraph return that sits here doesn't match the rest of your copy. So if you do go in and you select the entire paragraph, you'll now notice some of these areas are blank. That's because you've got multiple values going on. And this could be a real problem. If you've ever run into any copy where the last line seems to sit further below everything else in your last bit of InDesign, like that, you can't figure out why the last line in your entire text container does that. It's this right here. That has different parameters on it, which is causing that last line to not sit with the rest of the paragraph. So, when you do go in and you select, I'm going to turn off my hidden characters right now. When you do go in and select the entire paragraph here, most likely you're going in and selecting everything that you can see. The problem is you're not selecting that last piece of the paragraph, which inevitably will cause this to not style absolutely correctly. So if you do go in and you start from the bottom and you start and go up, you won't be able to get a hold of that little paragraph return, okay? Do you see that? If I try to go here and try to select that and start from the bottom up, so going from my right to my left, I can never select that. However, if I start with my left and go to my right, I will be able to select that. Be aware of that because that is something that definitely will come back and cause issues when you start formatting your text, especially when we get into paragraph and character formatting. So, what's the one way to solve that? Go in and click 5 times, select the entire paragraph, including that paragraph return. Could be quite important. And you may think, well, you know, that's not a big deal. Well, check this out. I could take that paragraph return and I could format it as a completely different typeface, and you'd never know. So I'm going to change the typeface of that paragraph return, even though it doesn't print. And I'm also going to change the size, and I'm going to change the leading of this as well. Okay? This hidden character all of a sudden starts to change everything that I've done. But when I look at this, I don't see any problem. What's worse is that I may open up this InDesign file or send it to somebody and they say, you know what, I keep seeing these missing fonts, but I don't see any place where the font is missing right in here. Chances are, excellent chances are, it's your paragraph return that has not been formatted the same as your paragraphs, or was simply forgotten, or may have been styled completely differently. And then, when the paragraph is restyled, it wasn't selected. So, rule of thumb, when you select, always, always, always make sure you select your entire paragraph and that paragraph return in order to be able to make sure you get all of your style, your font, leading, kerning, tracking, all consistent and same throughout the entire paragraph.